Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are really undertaking a critical mission. We're aiming to synthesize the current strategic assessment of American sea power.
Yeah, and we're zeroing in specifically on the insights from the Navy League's 2023-2024 Maritime Policy Report.
Exactly. It serves as a pretty blunt evaluation, I'd say, of where the U.S. stands in what feels like a very rapidly changing world.
Oh, absolutely.
What immediately jumps out from the source material is just the sheer velocity of change. They pinpoint four, massive dynamic events that have fundamentally altered the whole geopolitical equation.
You're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic fallout.
Right, the final withdrawal from Afghanistan.
U.S. administration change back in 2020, and then, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, undeniable.
And these weren't just, small adjustments. These were tectonic shifts. They basically mandated an immediate pivot in the National Defense Strategy, the NDS. So this new strategy is now explicitly threat-based. It prioritizes four main areas. First, defending the homeland, which is a challenge now really paced by the PRC, China. Second, deterring strategic attacks. Third, deterring aggression. And notice the order here. It's PRC in the Indo-Pacific first, then Russia in Europe.
And fourth.
And finally, building a resilient joint force.
That's a powerful set of marching orders. It really moves the U.S. far away from that, post-Cold War comfort zone.
Definitely.
We're just not operating with a monopoly on sea control anymore. So the core question we want to unpack today is, it seems simple, but it's complex. How must the four key sea services, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and the U.S.-flagged Merchant Marine adapt?
It's the crucial question. Let's start with the threat landscape.
Okay.
The People's Republic of China, the PRC, is officially the pacing challenge. And their investments are, frankly, staggering.
In what ways?
We're seeing major increases across their fleet. New carriers, destroyers, submarines, even polar icebreakers, which is significant.
And they're not just building ships, are they?
No, not at all. They're actively exerting sovereign claims in international waters, literally building artificial islands in the South China Sea. And they're leveraging their huge maritime Silk Road initiative to sort of cement economic and military influence globally.
It really feels like a calculated, very patient, long game.
It does.
And while, the focus is paced by China, we can't just ignore Russia.
Absolutely not. Their attack on Ukraine showed their willingness to, destabilize the international order. Plus, they're investing heavily in sophisticated cyber capabilities.
And those hypersonic weapons we keep hearing about.
Exactly. Hypersonics pose a real threat to maritime assets worldwide. It creates a very complicated sort of two-front strategic problem for the U.S.
So how are the Navy and Marines responding? You mentioned it's not just about more ships.
Right. The sources really stress this. It requires a fundamental transformation, not just more of the same. For the Navy, this is embodied in this concept called Distributed Maritime Operations, or DMO.
DMO. I've heard the term, but what does it actually mean in practice? How does it work?
Well, think of it as the opposite of concentration. For decades, Navy power was focused around those huge capital ships, the aircraft carriers.
Right, the Carrier Strike Group.
DMO moves away from that. It means disaggregating forces, scattering units across the entire operational area.
So spreading them out.
Spreading them out. The goal is to really complicate the enemy's targeting calculus, their decision-making. If they want to land a knockout blow on one big ship, they can't easily because our forces are more dispersed. We're essentially using the ocean itself as part of the defense.
Okay, I see. Turning geography into an advantage.
Precisely. And this strategy feeds directly into the Navy's future vision, which they call Force Design 2045. The CNO, Admiral Gilday, talked about a future hybrid fleet.
Hybrid meaning?
A mix. Fewer massive, sort of exquisite platforms and a huge addition of new unmanned system surface, subsurface aerial assets.
Unmanned. Any numbers on that?
Yeah, the capacity goal includes up to 150 unmanned vessels.
Wow, 150. That's a significant number.
Yeah.
But doesn't relying on smaller, dispersed, maybe unmanned systems shift the maintenance burden? Puts more stress on the industrial base.
It absolutely does. That's the strategic trade-off right there. You're trading, perhaps, concentrated firepower for complexity, distribution, and sheer numbers. It's a different way of operating.
And I imagine the trade-off is mirrored in the Marine Corps Big Shift, Force Design 2030.
Completely mirrored. Their focus is laser sharp on the Indo-Pacific, specifically operating in contested coastal areas, the littorals.
And they're emphasizing these stand-in forces, or SIF?
SIF, yeah. It's a really interesting concept. Don't think big battalions. Think small, highly mobile missile and sensor units, maybe hopping between remote islands or coastlines.
So nimble.
Very nimble. They're designed to persist forward, inside the enemy's weapon engagement zone, acting as the fleet's eyes and ears, setting up a kind of maritime defense in depth. They have to be light, fast, agile.
And to get that agility, the Marines have been making some big changes, right? Divestments.
Significant divestments, yes. Some have been controversial. They're reducing total end strength, getting rid of units like tanks, heavy bridging, heavy airlift capabilities.
Trading tanks for missiles, essentially.
That's a good way to put it. There's definitely been debate, shedding proven heavy armor. But the strategic logic, according to the report, is clear.
Which is?
Shifting those resources toward developing long-range precision fires, like the Naval Strike Missile. It's a pivot from a heavy logistical footprint to rapid dispersal and the ability to strike from unexpected places.
Okay, so Navy and Marines transforming. But the report stresses they don't operate alone. Let's talk about the enablers.
Crucial point. We have to talk about the U.S. Coast Guard first. They often fly under the radar.
But their impact is huge, right?
Enormous. The Coast Guard has 11 statutory missions, and those missions are only growing. They deliver an incredible return on investment, blending law enforcement, search and rescue, defense roles seamlessly, yeah. And they're vital for the economy, too. Figure. They facilitate commerce worth $5.4 trillion a year across the maritime transportation system.
That number alone, $5.4 trillion, underscores their importance. They are, in effect, an economic stability force.
Are they getting the resources they need? Modernization.
They're in the middle of a really important recapitalization effort, building new national security cutters, offshore patrol cutters. That's going well. But there's a big gap strategically in the high latitudes, the Arctic, the Antarctic, areas of growing great power competition. To really meet national demands there, the service needs a minimum of 6 icebreakers.
And they don't have 6 now.
Nowhere close. That's a critical shortfall.
That need for access, especially polar access, connects to the other, often unseen, foundation, the U.S. flag merchant marine.
Yes, the USMM. The report highlights a stark, frankly dangerous readiness crisis here.
This is the fleet that carries supplies, fuel, troops in a conflict? Exactly, it's the logistics backbone. But the government-owned Sea Lift fleet capacity and its readiness have fallen to, well, the report says, critical levels.
And it's not just ships, it's people too.
That's a huge part of it, a major personnel shortfall. MARAD, the Maritime Administration, estimates the U.S. would need an additional 1,839 mariners just to crew the ships needed in a prolonged crisis.
Wow, 1,839 short. That shortage seems to point directly to a bigger issue across all the services.
It does, personnel. And maintaining that domestic mariner workforce is why policies like the Jones Act are so important, not just for economics, but for national security. It keeps U.S. ships crewed by U.S. mariners.
Okay, let's pivot then. We've hinted at it, but let's address these critical systemic challenges head on. People, policy, and production. The personnel crisis seems to be hitting everyone.
It is. Readiness across the board is being undermined by problems with recruitment and retention.
I saw a figure in the report that was, well, truly shocking. A DoD survey found only about 9% of young Americans who were capable of serving actually had any desire to enlist.
9%?
9%. That number alone just reframes the entire discussion about U.S. readiness, doesn't it? It's a crisis before anyone even steps on a ship.
It absolutely is. And then, for those they do manage to recruit, the services are struggling to keep them. Why? Persistent, often worsening, quality of life issues.
Like what specifically?
Well, when we talk about strategic liabilities, it's not always about high-tech threats. Sometimes it's about whether sailors or Marines can afford to feed their families. The sources state 1 in 6 military and veteran families face food insecurity.
1 in 6. That's unacceptable.
And housing affordability is another huge one. 60.9% are paying more than they can comfortably afford for housing near bases. When military families struggle with basics, retention plummets. It's fundamental.
And these personnel issues, they connect directly to the vulnerabilities in the defense industrial base, the DIB.
Directly. Over the last few decades, the drive for efficiency led to massive industrial consolidation. We prioritized cost-cutting over redundancy.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The number of tactical missile suppliers. It went from 13 down to just 3.
13 to 3.
Fixed-wing aircraft suppliers went from 8 down to 3. This lack of competition, this lack of surge capacity, is now a major strategic liability.
And here's where the report gets really alarming, I thought. It states that our peacetime production capacity for missiles, for precision munitions, It's so inadequate it would take years to replace what we expect to use in just the first few weeks of a major conflict.
Years! Let that sink in. We might fire off our inventory quickly, but we can't replenish it fast enough to sustain a high-intensity fight.
That's terrifying.
That production gap is compounded in shipbuilding, too. Only 7 shipyards, owned by just 4 contractors, build the Navy's large warships today.
That sounds incredibly fragile.
It is. It's why the government had to invoke the Defense Production Act just to boost production rates for the Virginia-class submarines. The industrial base needs sustained, stable investment to build back redundancy and capacity, not just in time.
Okay, people. Production. The last systemic challenge you mentioned was policy, specifically the law of the sea.
UNCLOS, yeah. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Here's the irony. Our military operates by its rules, our leaders support it.
But the U.S. hasn't actually ratified the treaty.
Exactly. We follow most of it, but we haven't formally joined.
Why does that matter? It sounds a bit like a diplomatic technicality.
It's far more than that. The implications are immediate. Ratification would give the U.S. significantly greater legal leverage. Think about confronting China's illegal fishing fleets or Russia trying to stake outsized claims in the Arctic for resources.
We have more standing to call them out.
Precisely. By staying out, we diminish our ability to lead on maritime law, and we weaken our critiques of those who do violate the rules we generally follow. It's like fighting with one hand tied behind our back, policy-wise, a self-inflicted wound.
So, pulling all this together, what does it mean for you, the listener? The strategic goal seems incredibly tough. Maintain global maritime dominance.
Which requires that huge technological transformation DMO, Force Design 2030.
While simultaneously fixing these critical domestic problems. Personnel readiness, industrial capacity shortfalls.
It's a massive undertaking. And achieving it requires, according to the report, 2 things above all. First, sustained, stable, and predictable funding. Industry can't invest in capacity without it.
And second.
Second, and maybe harder politically, is getting congressional support for divesting older, legacy assets. We simply can't afford the fleet of the future if we keep pouring money into maintaining the fleet of the past indefinitely. Tough choices are needed.
So the final takeaway for you listening is this. American prosperity, American security, they are fundamentally linked to open, secure access to the world's oceans. Maintaining that requires a ready, modern, and this is key, an integrated naval force.
Integrated meaning not just the Navy, but the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, and the Merchant Marine, all working together effectively. They all depend on each other.
Which brings us to a final thought to leave you with.
Yeah, think about this. Given these severe vulnerabilities we've discussed across the defense industrial base, the reliance on single-source suppliers, the incredibly slow munition production, and you combine that with the huge personnel readiness challenges, what's the true cost we've paid for constantly prioritizing efficiency over capacity and redundancy?
What's that cost measured in maybe real resilience or
Yes.
deterrence capability?
Exactly. It forces you to consider these domestic weaknesses, recruitment shortfalls, industrial fragility, not just as domestic issues, but as real strategic military liabilities.
That's a powerful question. How decisions made here at home about, say, military housing or shipyard investments directly shape America's ability to project power and maintain stability abroad? Something to definitely think about.